okay, I have found like profound love and joy for myself. And I really want to spread that, like we just mentioned in my legacy statement. But I want to share my story. Okay, well, why do I want to do that? Because loving and joyful people elevate the world. That's how you make the profound impact.
So, Jess, welcome to Owning Your Legacy. I'm so honored to have you on my podcast because I have eaten up your book and I can't wait to dive into it. If you could introduce yourself to our audience, that would be fantastic.
Absolutely. My name is Jess Kaskov, and I am an author of the book Soul Salary: 4 Profoundly Impactful Steps to Aligning Your Time and Energy with What Feels Joyous and Fulfilling. And I'm also a motivational speaker and certified life coach.
I would love to hear how you got here and your story.
Oh man, that is quite a story. So I went from industrial engineer to now author, speaker, coach. Not normally the sides of the brains that match. Those are 2 different sides of the brain.
Yeah.
So my story is a little bit of a journey. It wasn't an on-off switch. So I worked for 15 years in engineering in food manufacturing for a Fortune 500 company. Really enjoyed it. But one day they said, we're doing layoffs. So we have 6 weeks till we'll tell you if you have a job or not, which is a long time to wait.
Being in limbo, that sounds
Right.
very hard.
So I decided to do a little reflection and say, hey, if I don't have a job, let's do a little self-discovery of what did I like about my past 15 years so far, and what would I take forward in a next job or next career.
Yeah.
I'm a very reflective person, so I asked myself kind of hard questions. And one of them was, what legacy have I already left? And so it does
I love that you use the word legacy. I'm like, yay.
It fits the podcast, doesn't it?
Yes, Owning Your Legacy. I love that you were thinking that way, though.
Yes, I was thinking, what is the legacy I've left in my 15 years if I have to leave right now, if they're asking me to
What's
leave?
the difference I made?
Right, exactly. Yeah. And so I had been at 2 manufacturing plants and had worked there, and both had closed. So it was no longer the equipment process improvement I put in place, the equipment improvement I put in place. It's truly the impact I had on those people that I managed and interacted with. That was all that was left of my legacy. And honestly, I'm proud of that legacy, but it was also eye-opening to me. The engineer in my brain was, we got to do the equipment, improvements, the process improvements, and I also have a big people side, so I'm thankful that I do, because I was able to also make that impact last, because those others did not with the plants closing. So that was eye-opening to me of, oh, that's the true difference made that lasts, which might seem, very easy to think of, but it wasn't for me at the time. So, And the second thing I really asked myself during this reflection was, what role was my favorite? And I was thinking, okay, is it going to be my operations leadership? Is it engineering? Is it continuous improvement? And it was my human resources cross-functional role. So
Which it wasn't even in your major at all,
no,
right?
not at all.
So you were industrial engineer?
Industrial engineering, yes.
And couldn't be more different.
Yes, they asked me to do a human resources role during the plant closure. I really was there to help people exist in the in-between. We're still running, but you're about to, this plant's about to be closed and many people losing their jobs.
That's not a small HR role.
No, not at all.
Like being the psychiatrist and the therapist and the...
Yes.
Wow.
So I was already on the leadership team, so it was a role that I felt prepared for, and I had managed both operating departments, so I knew everybody. So it actually was like therapeutic for myself, to be honest, to be able to support everyone through that, because that was how I supported myself as well. But it really changed me as a person and as a leader, because I really realized again that supporting and motivating others is what I love and really enjoyed, and it filled me up. And so in the end of the 6 weeks, I had a job. And I was like, okay, well, you can't unsee what you've seen.
Yes. And then it filled you up in a kind of a dark time,
Right.
Even though it was hard for the people that you were helping through that it still filled you up is pretty big.
Yes. And yeah, it definitely changed me. But you can't unsee what you've already seen. So that's really when I started the dimmer switch off of my engineering career and my dimmer switch on of the career I'm in now, which is, authorship and speaking and coaching.
And I would love you to talk about the pitches, because I think so many of the listeners, you were really brave in seeing what you wanted and working with your employer, and I don't know if you can say who it is or not, but that just taking that brave step. So talk about that a little bit.
Thank you for saying that. It did feel very brave in the moment too, because I had not asked for anything really from my company, not even a raise or anything. And I had come to this kind of pivotal moment. I have a job now still, and I've decided I need to start moving towards this passion of mine. And so I pitched a part-time arrangement in 24/7 manufacturing. That is not common. And I'm really thankful that my manager and the team there supported it.
Yeah.
And so that was my first pitch. And what I tell people when they ask me about it is, you're already at a no. If you don't ask, you're already at a no. So the worst thing they could say when you ask is a no when you're already there because you haven't asked.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly. What do you have to lose? Except, how did the other coworkers feel? Did you have any worries about how your other coworkers would feel?
Yeah. And I had conversations, and the way I pitched it was very reasonable for the company and for myself. So I did keep a lot of my responsibilities, but it was very clear on, I have this day off and this afternoon off, and I'll make these other things happen, but it will not be during those times, and I'm not gonna work more than X hours a day type thing.
Right.
So I did keep almost all of my manufacturing plants that I was managing, but one of my bigger ones did move to another person, but they were light at the time. So it just worked out. I mean, honestly, if you're open to creative solutions, they come, right?
Yeah.
If you really just open yourself up and say, this is what I want, how can I get there?
You were manifesting, weren't you?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, that's a good way to put it. And I also met with my mentors and said, I'm going to pretend like you're my manager and I'm going to pitch to you. And they gave me really good insight. They were like, oh, I would change that, or maybe start with this, or,
So role playing.
Role playing, yeah.
Where did you find these mentors?
I had a women's mentoring circle in the company I worked for, and it was really nice because they did it for women in supply chain, because there's not a lot of women in supply chain. Becoming more and more common, but it was not 15 years ago. So we had a women's mentoring group, so I talked to the leader of that, and then an old manager I brought in to also hear my pitch and give me some advice. And then someone who had pitched a sabbatical, I reached out to them about their sabbatical, and eventually did pitch a sabbatical as well months later. So you just ask, and
you got that too?
I did get the sabbatical, and that's when I wrote the book. And during the part-time arrangement, I did night school to become a certified life coach, and ultimately ended up, quitting the job to be 100% entrepreneur.
Wow. Is this customer, I almost said, is this company, do they use your framework, or have they had you come in and do any workshops?
I have. A lot of the women's mentoring circles have reached out. So I have done multiple women's mentoring circles, like we call it a little book club. So they get the book and we do some of the exercises. It's actually been really cool to stay in touch, and I have nothing but great feelings for that company. So
let's dive into the book, because there's a lot to unpack there, isn't there? So talk about the four aspects of it, and really share with our listeners so they can understand how they can take the test and figure out how to make their life more, what's that? High earner. High earner.
Yeah, so the book is called Soul Salary, SOUL. And it's not the financial salary you earn at your job, obviously. It's the salary you pay yourself and your soul. And so the way I define that is, soul salary is the value that your soul receives when your time and energy are in alignment with what feels joyous and fulfilling. So I came up with the title talking to my best friend on the phone during the pandemic. And both of us were overwhelmed. We were overworked. We were in or near burnout, probably in burnout. And we really felt this need and the societal pressure, I guess, to work like we don't parent and parent like we don't work.
That is just like a mic drop right there. I swear, my entire life, I felt like I did that with my children. I was telling you, I have 5 boys, and I had this weird, no one told me to think like that, but when I would get home, I would want to act, I would want the kids to feel like I didn't have a job, like a big job, or, even at times it wasn't as big. But when I read that, I was like, I get that. And then you go to work and you want people at work to think you don't have any children. It's like,
Yep.
And in reality, we need to pull all that together.
Yeah. And I mean, that's what we felt. We felt all these expectations that were not, you can't live up to that. You can't
unsustainable.
be 100% two things. Like you just, that's not a thing.
Right. And it's like the opposite of alignment, whatever that is,
Right.
disassociated, I guess.
Yeah. And so when I was talking to her, I said, it just sucks that our financial salary and like our title is how we're deemed as successful or not. And I go, wouldn't it be cool if it was just like the salary you paid yourself or your soul? And I was like, oh, that's a concept. And then my creative juices just started flowing, and I really ran with it. Really ran with it.
I'm intrigued that, you went into engineering. When you were a little girl, did you have other sides
did.
of creative? Yeah, I would
I
imagine.
totally did. And what's interesting is I was the like impetus for remembering that I had writing a book on my bucket list was I was going through my childhood memorabilia boxes. My parents moved and they're like, here's all your memorabilia.
Yeah, take
as,
it.
as they should. Yeah. They don't need to keep that. And so I was going through those boxes and I found a poetry award that I got in middle school. And I completely forgot that I used to love writing poetry. And I loved writing stories. I would stay up late. My mom gave me her old typewriter. And I would stay up late typing on the typewriter stories. And it just like reminded me. And I had totally forgotten. I think, again, in that societal realm, what's more impressive, math and science, a girl in engineering, or a creative? And I do think creativity is majorly undervalued because it is so wonderful and it's such a great outlet for me. I've always journaled and I didn't realize that not everyone journals. So I've been writing in a different way for many years and not realizing it.
Yes.
But I think I just went down that path because it was impressive versus, I'm good at it and I like parts of that for sure, but I really resonate more with the creative and people side.
I think you're right. I think, especially writing, it's hard to find in our corporate world sometimes good writers. And especially like emotional writers that are
Heart-centered.
like,
Soulful, yeah, thank you.
So yes, more about the book. So
Yeah.
break it down for us on how we can get to
Absolutely.
high earner.
So yes,
That's
that
the
is the
goal.
goal. That is the goal. So that's when you feel really joyous and fulfilled is when you become a high earner in soul salary. So there are 4 steps, but before the 4 steps, I have everyone in the book or who hears this podcast start with what is your soul salary right now? Are you a high earner? Are you middle class? Are you minimum wage? We start there. And I have a free quiz online. I know it'll be linked. But start
Yes.
there because it gives you an overall percentage of where you're at. And then it also breaks it down into basic needs, joy, and fulfillment. So where are you in each of those subcategories? And then it gives some tips. So that's where the book starts. And that's also where you can do it online as well. And the reason we start there is because I first want you to check where you need to focus.
Okay.
And because the next chapter, before you get to the 4 steps, is called Demand Minimum Wage, It's the Law. You are the CEO of your life, and if you are not giving yourself the bare minimum, you are not allowed to read the rest of my book. You need to start there. And I give ways to start doing that, and that is the very first chunk of the book. Understand your baseline and make sure that you are taking care of yourself minimally. And a way I put that is, can you recover from your day within the day? Can you recover from your week within the week?
I love that.
And at a minimum, can you recover from your month within the month? If you can't, you are constantly depleting yourself. And you are going to be in burnout if you're not already. And there's a quote that I have heard that I say all the time now because it truly was unfortunately true for me. If you don't make time for your wellness, you will be forced to make time for your illness.
Yeah.
And so you are not allowed to go to the 4 steps until you start there.
Until
I'm very
you start
passionate
there.
about that.
No, I agree. And so when you got there, what did you do? I mean, when you felt like, oh my gosh, now I have to, deal with illness, like what were the kind of signs and what did you have to do about that?
Yeah, so I had a mental health I had mental health issues after I had my first son and after my second son.
Yeah.
And so really it just ended up being, the first son, it ended up being kind of, I waited 6 months before I got help.
Right.
And so I just let the depletion happen. Therapy was a big part of it for me.
Yeah.
My second, it was more of a crisis. And so it just, you gotta notice it and take the right steps. And I don't think I did a good job with my first child, but the second child, I knew what to do. And also I think the biggest thing I have in that chapter and that I have learned personally is I have to have self-trust. I need to trust that I will take care of myself, that I will radically take care of myself. And I was so depleted from childbirth and labor and breastfeeding and all the things, I was not radically self-care. If I probably wasn't even minimum self-care.
And from the sounds of you, you probably were back to work quickly, I have a feeling.
Yeah, was back to work pretty quickly. Yeah, it's a struggle I think a lot of new moms have, but I think a lot
absolutely.
of not moms even have mental health issues or I mean, severe burnout can also show up physically, right? There's physical symptoms as well. Mine just manifested in a mental health format.
And especially, was that kind of around that COVID time, would you say, or was it?
No, it was not for me.
Not for you, but yeah. But I mean, we've all heard that with.
Absolutely.
Like that brought everything up to the surface, I think, for so many of us and a lot of people struggling.
Yeah, and I think that what I put in my book and what I personally have done is to ask my body in the morning, what does my body need? What does my body feel? What do my emotions feel? What do my mental health feel? Like, where am I at right now? And let's say, like, emotionally, I just feel like I need to cry. But I have to get through a work day today. Yeah. So what I'm doing is, all right, what can I do about that? Well, I'm going to watch a really, really sad movie tonight. And then I will do the same thing for mentally and physically. I'll say, what are things I could do? And I pick one. Yeah. I just pick one of the things, and I do it, and I commit to it. And that's building self-trust. Because when I can trust myself to take care of myself, I'm not worried about a mental health issue because I know that I can check in with myself and say, ooh, I'm feeling really anxious now. I'm going to need to go do some grounding. Or I just need a hug from my husband. You know what I mean? Like, I really
12
just
hugs
need
a day, they say.
Yeah, I'll take a 12-minute hug. You know?
Yes.
That sounds good to me.
It just says something totally unrelated, but I think it was on Instagram, and I never saw this before, but at Disney, when they're...
Yes, I saw
Did you see that? It was so... I never knew that. So when they're in costume and a kid comes up for a hug, and apparently it is just a kid, I don't know if it's adults too, but they're not allowed to let go until the kid lets go. I never knew that.
So sweet.
So I think probably why I got minimum wage when I took this, or maybe it was part of it. I mean, it was just a crap day. I don't know why the hell I took your test on the crappiest day.
Do you know what though? I think that's actually a good thing to do it on the crappiest day.
Maybe it is.
Because sometimes you need the reality check of low numbers in a quiz to say,
because if you're having a really good day, then you might not.
Well, I'm 100% today.
And reveal where things are off a little. I like that.
Yeah, I think it actually kind of shocks you into, oh, maybe I need to do some work here.
But you were sharing a story like that about, I need a good cry today, and it was the anniversary of my dad's death, but it was 17 years ago. It wasn't like it was 2 years ago. And I'm like, I need a good cry today. Like, I heard you say that. And I'm like, but exactly, you got to get through your work day.
Yeah.
I totally know what you mean. There's this time and place, and now you got to put that over here, and it's hard to go back to it. Right. So I wrote a post and cried, and it was perfect.
That's awesome.
Back into the writing thing,
Yes, that's a great way to process emotions. So, I think crying is such a good energetic release.
Yes.
I think if you can cry, man.
I agree. Sometimes it's harder to cry than not cry, and this has got to be a woman thing, and we're going to have to talk about this.
No, I think men need to cry too.
I do too. But sometimes we'll have to ask them at some point, but sometimes I think we've freaked them out. Like, I would say my partner's a firefighter, and so he's a caretaker, like he wants to fix stuff a lot. And I'm like, I just need a good cry. Like, it's nothing about you. This is like, I have to do that sometimes. And
give me the 12-minute hug while I cry. And do not try to fix me, please.
Exactly. And that's it. And we'll be good. Good to go. Yeah.
Yes. So that's where I start, is the basic needs, for sure, is where we begin the book. And then it kind of goes into these 4 steps, which are very easy to understand because they're aligned with the definition of salary, right? Like, you have paychecks, you have bills, you get raises and promotions, you have budgeting, and that's the concept of the 4 steps. And it starts with identifying your paychecks. So what fills you up, what brings you joy, what feels fulfilling, is what we start with identifying. And you would be shocked to know how people just don't know.
I'm not shocked at all.
Not.
Yeah. And I loved how you said to get to the root of that. So I've definitely been in there. I don't, places in my life where I don't even know what I want. I don't even know. And how do you help people get to that?
Yeah. So the book is a book and workbook in one. So there are multiple exercises in like the paycheck section of how to understand what feels joyous. There's multiple because you want to come out at different parts of the brain, right? And so you get different answers.
I like when you were saying a part of it, and you kind of just said it now, that you used to write when you were young, but giving people advice to go back to their childhood and what did you like when you were a child?
Yes. I have that as there's a memory exercise to go back to a joyous memory, and then you go through the 5 sentences and you sit with it. and you actually like relive the moment, because your brain doesn't know what's real and what's not. It feels like you're there again.
Wow.
And so it's a great way to just bring a little joy glimmer in your day. If you remember a moment, you can just always come back to that moment. Just if you're having a day, you can come back to that joy glimmer. But I do have a few joy moment exercises to bring you back, and then also say, okay, what about that? Was it the smell of the ocean? That's what I love. That just brings me back to that moment. I just need I just need salt water. I'll go take a saltwater bath, because that's what brings it to me.
Water,
Doesn't
for
always
sure.
have to be
I heard
the ocean.
you're a mermaid too.
Yes. You were a mermaid?
I'm a
Oh
mermaid.
my
I was
gosh.
I wish I could be a mermaid.
Maybe we were mermaids in the same ocean.
Maybe we were. Water is for sure a thing.
Yes, absolutely.
And you're right, even a bath can do it.
And so it's interesting when you go to like that joy moment, because it could be something that you thought it was going to the beach, but it was actually just salt water, or it was actually looking at seashells and finding seashells. Well, I could find that on the lake beach, or I can find that on the shells that I brought home from the beach, hold them and feel that energy of the beach type thing. So there's just different ways to find the joy within the moment that you remember. And I say go beyond births and weddings. That's too easy.
Right.
You got to pick something beyond that.
Right. And almost, yeah, like your senses. I like how you're talking about it, like from like that standpoint. And food, like food doesn't necessarily mean you want to like eat all the time. It might mean like you like, good restaurants, or
that I loved when my mom made buttery mashed potatoes for Thanksgiving. So buttery mashed potatoes makes me feel like a mom hug.
Yeah.
So like, you just find little things like that, and you dig deep. But it's also, a paycheck's also what feels fulfilling, and that's kind of where the legacy side comes in.
Okay.
And it's understanding, what are you passionate about? What do you feel like your purpose is? What difference do you want to make?
Which is the hardest darn question.
It is. It is. But I do have some exercises to kind of get you there, or at least I say, get to a point where you have something written, and
directional, maybe,
and it can always change.
That's what I was going to ask you. Do you think?
Absolutely.
Do you think it changes? Yeah.
Absolutely. Do you think I would have said this was my
purpose? Right.
I didn't know. You have to grow. You grow with it.
And different times of your life.
Absolutely. No, I think you can have an overarching life one, but it might not become clear until later in life. But I also think I like to sometimes just have a mini one. Like for this 6 months, this is my intention and purpose. And then I guess I still have a broad one. I do have a broad one that I do feels like pretty life, pretty much for life.
Yeah.
But for 6 months, I might say this is my purpose. But yeah, so that's the first step. Just getting those paychecks identified. See what you're moving towards instead of what you're moving away from.
Okay.
Then the second step is raises and promotions. So this is giving yourself more of those paychecks. So what brings you joy and feels fulfilling? How do I add more of that into my life? So the raises are the kind of low-hanging fruit, things you can quickly implement, and the promotions are those bigger steps that scare the crap out of you.
Yeah.
And so for me, a raise was asking for a part-time arrangement. A promotion was quitting my job.
Gotcha.
Right. So and I say in my book, and I joke that I increased my soul salary by decreasing my financial salary in that moment. And so
I'm guessing you never regretted it though.
No, I haven't. So that's the second step, is really increasing. And then the third step is where I lose people. People just bail on the third step because it is fun to find out what feels joyous and fulfilling. That's a really fun thing. And then bring more of that into your life. Awesome. Very fun. It's not as fun to find out what your bills are. So what's draining you? Again, once you see it, you can't unsee it. So once you actually do the work and find it, you can't unsee it. That's scary to some people. But I have to say, like, if you don't do the work on bills, your paychecks can be the highest they can be. But if your bills are also there, you're making $0 in soul salary, right? So you can't neglect the bills.
Yeah.
And so this really is a focus on what drains you. And I call the two things, bills, as joy killers, which are others' expectations and your own out-of-touch expectations that steal your joy.
Perfectionism.
Yes, perfectionism. Trying to parent like we don't work, right? And work like we don't parent. That's a joy killer for sure. And then soul suckers, I lovingly call soul suckers limiting beliefs and fears, which are stopping you from living a fulfilling life. So those are the two bills, and we go through exercises to identify those. And then the fourth step is budgeting and budget cuts. So similar to raises and promotions, budgeting is the low-hanging fruit. What can I reduce, mitigate, eliminate that are easier to do? And then the budget cuts are those really big life decisions that scare the crap out of you, but are eliminating a big bill from your life. And then you do these steps until you become a high earner. And then, you mentioned you took the quiz on a day that was hard for you. I suggest at least taking the quiz once a year. You do an annual review in work, right? So you need to give yourself an annual review. You're the CEO of your life.
Yeah.
You need to also be doing that.
Have you ever heard of that concept? We talk about it a lot, but delegate to elevate. And it's kind of like you just do like a cross, like quadrants, and simply write, and the stuff you love and you're really good at, the stuff that you're good at but you maybe don't love as much, down to the bottom one is, I hate this part of my job. And it's usually job related. And what can I delegate to somebody who loves that quadrant?
And I wonder too, I would challenge too, is it worth delegating? Can it be eliminated?
Truly.
Truly. And I will say at the old company I worked for, we often said, are you uniquely qualified to do that work?
That's a great thought.
Are you uniquely qualified? Because if you're not, I need you to be doing things that you're uniquely qualified for. You're an engineer. I need you focused on that, right? Not payroll. Right? Or, putting in timesheets. Literal example from work. So, sometimes it's also like how do we just eliminate this? And or mitigate it or reduce it?
It's not a value add to anyone's life. Like email.
Yes.
Email is getting more and more, so much junk. There's just so much noise in there, and that doesn't bring anyone any joy.
It feels demanding. Often.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'd love you to dive a little deeper into, because I think this is a profound one about the expectations of others. I think that's a hard one to even identify, so talk a little more about that. I like that concept.
Yeah, so that's the joy killers in the book. And what I do is I have an exercise that I also do when I do speaking gigs. And I say, write down, in the book it's like write down many, but to start, write down 5 things that you expect of yourself and 5 things others expect of you. And you start there. And then you reread the list. And if you can replace I have to with I want to or I desire to, then it's an expectation that's authentic to you. And if it's an I should or I have to, and it does not authentically, if I put I want to, it does not feel true, then that's not something that's authentic to yourself as an expectation. So it's a nice way to start to understand, what am I carrying that's not mine, or that I don't want it to be mine anymore, right? Because we're often, I was raised to be impressive. And I think a lot of people are, just as a society, it's much more fun to be impressive because you get all the praise, right?
Right.
And so that was something I didn't realize was conditioned and not personally, I guess, as strongly felt, right? I do enjoy that, but I don't think that's my mission in life, right?
Right.
And so it's...
So you got that, where do you feel like you got that from, that expectation? Just society, or?
I personally pushed myself, I think, as well. Like, there was a lot of... I'd love to just blame it on someone, but no, it was like a personal push. No one was telling me to be president of all these organizations, and it was also a major personal push because it was delightful to be praised, right? And so
that's a really deep. I do wonder how much of it we're born with. My mom would definitely be the one in my life that would be like, you need a day off. And I was in like 3rd or 4th grade. I'd be up doing my homework, I'd lay out my uniforms. I went to a Catholic school, my uniform would be laid out the night before. And I don't know where this came from. It was not her. And not anything dissed about her, but she could see when I was getting close to burnout for sure, more than I could.
That's awesome. What a gift.
It really was a gift. It was a gift.
And that helps signal you to know in your own body.
Yeah, and I know that you were on a podcast that was really interesting with a divorced lawyer, and you were talking just about this expectation of society of a lawyer. I thought that was, talking about how we have to get over that, and really not feel so, I don't know, almost handcuffed, right? To
It's the shoulds. The shoulds. It's truly the killer of joy is all the shoulds.
And someone else had said to me, instead of with the whole, mother guilt often been a big part of my life, instead of mother guilt, you say mother want. And like what, because you do want, you definitely want. And to like reframe that, I think is.
Yeah. How do we make joy our GPS and just truly say, like, going to that recital sounds joyous to me.
Right.
Baking the brownies for PTA does not.
I love.
And so,
That's perfect.
and
Buying them, I'm all right. Instacarting them, but I'm
not bringing them at all.
Yep.
I mean, there's people who love baking.
Right. I mean, that
great.
kind of goes to that delegate thing where there are things on my list that you might love or vice versa.
Right.
And somebody would love it. But oh my God, how many times, football parents would be like, oh, we're going to come decorate the cars. And then I'm like, no joy in that for me. Not, being at the game, tons of joy.
Absolutely.
But I don't need to decorate the cars. Like
Yes.
at 6 a.m. in the morning.
And knowing that, like, we need to pause and know that about ourselves. Because you're unintentionally signing up for bills that you feel like are, oh, I'm doing this great service. You're not, to be honest, because you're doing a disservice to yourself. Yeah. And that's first and foremost. If you're not filled up, you can't, I know it's a cliche, but you can't pour from an empty cup.
And the oxygen thing. I mean, that's the old one too, but it's very true. You got to put it on yourself first. And saying all that, it's even back to the kid thing. It's like, but what do you do when you know what matters to them? Back to even this decorating the car thing. It's probably a stupid example, but if my kids really were like, Mom, will you come? You know, like we'd really like to have you. Or so what do you do with that when you feel that you don't want to go, but you're doing it for your kids?
I like the saying quality versus quantity, which is...
my mom used to say to me.
Did she? Oh my gosh, I'm channeling your mom today. So I think it's about quality time, but it doesn't need to be all the time.
I agree.
Right? So it's, hey, I'm going to help you do our car, and then I'm peacing out.
Yeah, exactly.
Like I'm happy to do our car, and then I have a meeting. Right. No, I mean, I just think there's always three options, right? You know, stay as it is, do the thing, or there's always a middle gray option that is a creative solution. Like you have to be open to creative solutions. I have learned that because I was very black and white. I was like, this or that. And there's always something in the middle, always, that you can come up with if you're open to that creative solution. Like do one car instead of all of them. I'm staying for 30 minutes instead of 2 hours. Or you know, there's a middle ground, and you get to pick which one of you can always do the black and white options. It's just good to know that you have a gray and you can still pick.
And being resourceful and creative sometimes in that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's definitely hard stuff. So talk a little bit about the really scary one, which is the budget cuts, right? Is that the one that's and I like when you talk about, you know, dimmer switch. So you don't have to go all the way, you know, 0 to 60. But if someone's really afraid of a budget cut, give someone examples of that and like what you would recommend.
Yeah. For my clients from coaching, I've had someone file for divorce. That's a huge budget cut.
That's huge.
And they ended up taking a step back and going to marriage counseling, and it worked out.
Look at that.
But she went right for the cut because she's like, this needs to be cut out of my life. But it also was a wake-up call to their partner.
Right.
And it ended up in a different direction than, you know, she thought it would. But, you know, it was you do the steps that you can stomach. You know, I didn't go right to quit my job.
Right.
I did the steps I could stomach. And honestly, to be honest, I didn't know that I was actually ever going to quit my job.
Yeah.
To be honest.
Would they have let you stay part-time? And do both? That's beautiful.
Yeah. I mean, there was no end date to the part-time. So, you know, who knows? Because anything could be fluid. But yes, that was the goal, is to stay part-time. So, but yeah, with the budget cuts, there are these questions I ask in the book that I love. And it's these very open-ended questions. And you get the most radical responses from. And one of them is, if there were no consequences, no pressures in life, what would you do? And then there's a bunch of open-ended questions like that. What's the most significant thing you could do for your soul right now, et cetera? There's these very open-ended questions, and they seem repetitive, but they're not. They're different parts of your brain, and you just write everything that comes to mind. And the most outrageous things, I say outrageous because it feels outrageous when you write them, come out, and many of my clients have done that thing. Like I had one who was like, I want to move to Arizona from Illinois, and I want to do a different job. And I was like, okay, well, what's our first step? Let's try it out. She's like, I'm gonna go vacation there. Vacation there. 3 months later, she was living there with a new job.
Wow.
Because she said, what's the most significant thing? I feel so alive in Arizona. I want to move there. And then it just became, how can I make that happen? Because your truest desires can come out if you're given permission to say, there are no consequences. What would you do? And then you go back and say, what are the real consequences of me doing that?
Yeah.
Right?
And what's the cost of not?
Oh, that's a good one. Yes. What's the cost of not? Oh, I like that.
Yeah. Is it?
And so those open-ended questions is where my clients always come up with the most radical change ideas. And so that's always a fun one for me to do, because we can talk about it. We say, like, what about that is scary? What about that is outrageous? What about that makes it not available to be true right now?
Right. So do you love the one-on-one coaching?
Yeah, I do.
would imagine that you do. And how do you do it? Can you do it virtual? I bet you could do it any which way, right?
Yep, any which way. I do group, I do virtual and in person. But the best part is seeing the dramatic changes. I just love that. I love deep, meaningful conversations. I just thrive on it. But I will say, my legacy statement is really kind of a broader impact. So I say that I want to make a profound impact on the world by spreading love and joy broadly, starting with me.
Ooh, that's beautiful.
So you say like, you need to put your oxygen mask on first. I need to have the love and joy in me to be able to spread it and make that profound impact on the world. So I loved the one-on-one coaching, but I realized if that's my legacy and I'm adjusting my time and energy to fit that, I want to write the book, because that's how I can reach so many more people. There's so many hours in a week that I can meet with clients.
Right.
But if I can coach through
It's your
my
scaling.
book,
It's how you can scale it.
yes, I'm basically coaching you in a book format or on a podcast or on there's just a broader audience. That's where I do spend a lot of my time, because I want that profound impact. I want to make a profound impact on the world. I really, truly do.
That's huge. And I know from all of us that have just even listened to you a little bit, you've definitely made an impact. So
Thank you.
So how has the book launch been for you? I think, and even the process. I mean, maybe touch on a little bit of the process of writing the book, and what were some of the obstacles or things that really maybe threw you off for a second? Or
Yeah. The big obstacle for me was motivation.
Yeah.
Because like I said, I knew I had bucket list, listed for my book. I was like, it's on my bucket list to write a book. Awesome. That got me through a few chapters.
Yeah, right.
And I said, well, why is it, I liked, as you now know, I'm very reflective. So I asked myself, why do I want this on my bucket list? Why is it even there? And I said, okay, well, through books, I get to time travel. I have a 9-year-old and a 6-year-old, and I want them to have this book even when I'm gone. I want their children to have it even when I'm gone, their children's children to have it. You get to time travel through writing a book. It's pretty cool.
Right.
And
you
then
become immortal.
Yes, it's
Wow.
really cool. I think that's really...
That is, I think it's very cool.
That felt very heartfelt, because it's, about my children and my future grandchildren, et cetera. And then I said, okay, well, why? Why do I even want to time travel?
Right.
And it's, okay, I have found profound love and joy for myself. And I really want to spread that, like we just mentioned in my legacy statement. But so I want to share my story. Okay, well, why do I want to do that? Because loving and joyful people elevate the world. That's how you make the profound impact. And just getting to that very intentional, just passion-driven, heartfelt intention, I was able to get through the writing, the editing, the formatting, the cover design, the publishing. I just really needed that juice to say, why am I doing this? And then it also helped build the book, because, what is the purpose? And understanding that and understanding my motivation around the book, it just flowed.
And you did it in 6 months, did you say?
Yes. Yeah.
Wow, that's unheard of. You're the first. We've had many authors on here, and you're the first that's done that fast, I believe.
Oh,
That's
wow.
really good.
Awesome. I felt like it was slow.
No, some of us are in 3 years over here. And yeah.
But there are definitely snafus. The editing took a lot longer than I expected. The cover design dragged. I don't know what happened there. It just dragged and dragged. And so having that motivation to keep I know this is an important thing to bring into the world.
Yeah.
I think really helped.
Literally, a woman I was talking to earlier was talking about, just even training, huge training for kayaking the Amazon. And she's had said something very similar of what kind of got her out of bed on those really exhausting days was that it was just kind of a beacon of light for other women. There's not a lot of women kayakers that would have done, no other woman has done the Amazon, but that it's about other people, you know, that it's.
I have a charm on my desk that says, "May you light the way." Ooh. And so that's like I literally look at it every day. It's like, "May you light the way."
Oh, I love that.
Be a lighthouse, you know?
Yeah. And then let others shine their light.
Mm-hmm.
That's beautiful.
Thank you.
So, Jess, I usually ask people, what is the legacy that you want to leave behind? But I think you perfectly stated that.
Thank you.
So, in your book, talk just for a minute or two about getting to that legacy statement, because I know that's part of the workbook.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think a chunk of the legacy statement is really understanding a few questions, which is, I die today, right? That's the typical one. I die today. What's the legacy I've already left? And am I proud of that? And what am I proud of, actually? What am I proud of what I've already left? Mm-hmm. That's a huge key. So I do a whole pride moments exercise. So similar to the joy moment exercise, you feel the five senses again. You say, when was a time when I felt very proud? And not like societal proud, right? Like personally proud. So I had a friend who is a doctor. She has her doctorate. She like birthed her children naturally and like
so did I,
everything.
mind you.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing.
It
so
was rather.
She's
one of my proudest.
She's a CEO of Edlong. She's yes. But she said those were not like her most proud moments, which I thought was really interesting because societally we'd say, wow, that's so impressive. She's like, actually, it's these other things. And so it's just interesting to look back.
Like what? Give us a little bit of like what?
So like she like healed herself. She ended up almost dying and she found like natural medicine and healed herself. She was so proud of that and now uses that to heal others. Cool. So she obviously is, feels, pride in a different way, like for all those things she did, but it wasn't like, what are you most proud of, right? What are you most proud of? And so it's an interesting question because I again say though, don't talk about births and weddings. So
it's so easy to go there, right?
Well, because it's incredibly difficult thing to do and also just it's a wonderful thing that happens.
Right.
But how do you go to other areas that you, where you feel proud? And then you go through the five senses again. What about it made me feel proud? Right. And so like, let's think about my human resources role.
Right. That's what I was thinking as you were saying this. It's when you've touched another's life, right?
Yes. For me, that's really what it is.
That would be too.
And I think a lot of people, the legacy really ends up going towards touching others' lives. But I will say you touching your own life touches others' lives. So even if your legacy statement is internal, that automatically exudes externally. It's like with my human resources role, I'm incredibly proud of that because it was a very hard time for me. I didn't know if I had a job or not either, right? And also helping people exist in that in-between, it was a very hard role, and yet I know I did a really good job there. I was very heart-based. We really supported the whole plant, and there was a team that did it. It wasn't just me, but the point is, I am so proud of that moment, and I think that's also maybe why it changed me as a leader in person, because I realized, a part of my true essence.
You should be proud of the fact that you really switched gears so much and tapped into where your joy is. Like that was very brave and really meant to be, because I think you are touching a lot of lives.
Thank you.
Very cool.
I think you hit on it too. I don't want to be living in regret.
Yeah.
What would it be like if you didn't do it? I don't want to be living in regret. I can always go back to food manufacturing.
Right.
But I really wanted to try this.
Back to my little story I was telling you about how owning your legacy even came to be. Like, you sell this beautiful thing and you can't buy it back, That would have been regret, I feel, like huge regret. So, Jess, where can our listeners find you and find your book?
Well, my book is on Amazon. And like I mentioned earlier, I really suggest doing the free quiz. There's 2 minutes of your time and you automatically get tips on how to increase your soul salary. If it's interesting to you, buy the book on Amazon and dive deeper. So I'm also on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn, Jessica Kaskov, Kaskov.
Great. And I will support the fact that it is a 2-minute quiz and you get a lot of really good information from doing that. So I highly recommend everybody to go out there and take that quiz. And Jess, thank you so much for being on Owning Your Legacy. And I'm so glad that your sister brought us together, I believe is who we have to give credit to. And I was like, yes, this is going to be so exciting. So good luck with everything and
Thank you.
keep going.
Thank you for having me. This was an awesome conversation.
Very awesome.